In news this week, 88 Christians kidnapped by Islamic State in Libya. 2,000 Christian teachers in Kenya are afraid to go to work. And the child preachers of Brazil.
This is InFocus Christian News and Current Affairs.
Hello, thanks so much for joining us for Record in Focus this week. I'm Kent Kingston, and at the news desk, ready for action, is Sibel Coutet. How are you, Sibel?
I'm great, thanks Kent. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm quite well.
Now, what about kale, the leafy green? Do you like that?
What about kale? Look, it's not bad, I guess, so long as it's prepared the right way. Yeah. It's a bit coarse, naturally, and can come across a bit like, hedge trimmings or something. Is that what Sue Rad's talking about today?
She is. No doubt she'll explain to us why kale has become so popular lately. You've also got an interview coming up with Roy Williams?
Yes, that's right. He's written a book exploring whether Australia is still a Christian nation, or has it ever been, and why Australia should be resisting those secularist forces trying to push religion out of the mainstream and into the margins.
Sounds worth exploring. I'm ready for the news now, are you?
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Kent. Grave fears are being held for the safety of 88 Eritrean Christians kidnapped by the Islamic State terror group in Libya. The Christians were part of a group of Eritreans and Egyptians who apparently entered Libya with the intention to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. According to Fox News, the IS militia divided Christians from Muslims and men from women, and drove each group away to unknown destinations in trucks. 3 of the Christian men managed to escape. IS in Libya has previously targeted Christians and on 2 occasions earlier this year released videos of Christians being beheaded. Also under threat from the IS terror group is what's believed by many to be the resting place of the biblical prophet Nahum. According to Haaretz, the 2,700-year-old tomb in the Iraqi city of Al-Kosh has been looked after by a Christian family since the last Jews fled the area in the 1950s. But discussions about restoring the tomb and the synagogue surrounding it have ground to a halt as the region is menaced by Islamic State. In other regions occupied by IS, churches and other religious monuments have been systematically destroyed. 95 government schools in northern Kenya have been shut down, and another 500 are considering their options after 2,000 Christian teachers refused to work, citing security concerns. In April this year, Al-Shabaab gunmen killed 148 people at the Garissa University College, singling out Christians during their killing spree. According to Religion News, the majority of school teachers in Kenya's Muslim-majority north are Christians, who are sometimes threatened by Al-Shabaab. The situation has also affected Christian schools, as teachers are lured away by the higher wage offers made by government schools desperate to stay open. Dozens of committed and active Christians were among the 519 Australians who received Queen's Birthday honours earlier this month. Awardees included high-profile Christians such as Reverend Keith Garner, CEO of Wesley Mission, and Reverend Graham Long, who heads up the Wayside Chapel in Sydney's King's Cross. But the honours list also includes the quiet achievers, whose faith informs their work as professionals, volunteers and active church members. 2 nurses who have gone above and beyond the call of duty are due to receive Order of Australia medals. John Sandberg and Marge Batchelor have both lent their professional skills to Open Heart International, an international medical outreach program coordinated by Sydney Adventist Hospital. Queen's Birthday celebrations were also held in Solomon Islands this month, providing the opportunity for Governor-General Sir Frank Kabui to make an official speech that has been described as both short and sharp. Sir Frank expressed his concern about corruption in Solomon Islands, but noted that the problem is as old as humanity itself. He said to the audience, which included the Prime Minister and other senior dignitaries, that corruption is a problem of the human heart, which can only be solved by God's intervention. Sir Frank called on those present to commit themselves to God and to recognise that His wisdom is superior to the wisdom of this world. The Mediterranean diet has been around since biblical times and is widely recognised as being associated with long life and positive health outcomes. But the United Nations, which officially lists the Mediterranean diet as part of humanity's cultural heritage, says eating patterns in Mediterranean countries are changing, and the health consequences are being felt. The UN is concerned that the move away from homegrown produce and the increased consumption of imported meats and dairy is leading to an increase in lifestyle diseases such as obesity, diabetes and heart disease.
What they've shown in one of the studies, the Lyon Diet Heart Study, is that men who've had a heart attack, if they're placed on the Mediterranean diet, it is more effective than medication or a low-fat diet to prevent a second heart attack. In fact, the men had a 70% lower risk.
Health experts around the world are looking for ways to encourage people to better appreciate the value of their food heritage. As Latin America's religious balance shifts away from Catholicism, Brazil's booming assemblies of God churches are seeing a new generation of child preachers come to prominence.
Essas crianças são a igreja de agora. A igreja que Deus levantou para pregar o evangelho nas escolas.
According to the New York Times magazine, claims are being made that thousands of child preachers are now operating in Brazil, conducting public evangelism series and healing meetings. Naturally, there are critics who claim the children are being exploited. But the detractors don't appear to be dampening the enthusiasm of the thousands who say they're blessed by these young people's ministries. A church group in Jamaica has attracted media attention with their generous efforts to renovate the home of a 96-year-old neighbour. According to the Jamaica Observer, Mary Dennison's timber home in Irwin, Montego Bay, was in desperate need of repair and leaked whenever it rained. Seventh-day Adventist church members from the Irwin congregation raised money for building materials and got to work, replacing rotten weatherboards and repairing the roof and floor. Theirs is only a small church with limited finances, so the project had to be conducted in phases. Nevertheless, Miss Dennison was pleasantly surprised to see the group return to finish what they had started and is overjoyed at the improvements they've made. People will do all kinds of unusual things to raise funds for a good cause, but playing the organ non-stop for 3 hours? Well, that just may be a brand new strategy. "22 organ players tag-teamed the organ marathon. The youngest was 7 years old and the oldest was 90. The organ marathon was hosted by the Avondale Memorial Seventh-day Adventist Church in New South Wales and raised $3,000 that will go towards the rebuilding of cyclone-devastated communities in Vanuatu. Iowa woman Lillian Weber had a goal to sew 1,000 dresses for African girls who needed them before her 100th birthday. 1,000 dresses might seem like an ambitious number, but by the time Miss Weber's centenary had arrived, she'd smashed her goal and is currently approaching 1,100 dresses. Little Dresses for Africa is a Christian charity focused on the needs of African girls, particularly AIDS orphans, who have been left with the responsibility of looking after their younger siblings. The standard dress pattern is based on the simple idea of repurposing pillowcases, a common and affordable item that's available in a wide variety of fabrics, colours and sizes. And that's it for the news. 1,000 dresses, Kent.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it? And made out of pillowcases. Yeah, it just, almost, makes me want to, drag the sewing machine out of the cupboard and, give it a go.
That's right. I'm not much of a seamstress, but it definitely looks like something I'd like to get to know how to do.
Yeah, it looks pretty simple. Hey, stay with us. I'll be back with Lyle Shelton and Politics in Focus in just a moment.
Travel back in time to ancient civilizations through this bi-monthly magazine, Archaeological Diggings. This month, Diggings goes inside the amazing burial mound at Amphipolis in Greece, a site to rival the tomb of King Tut. But who is buried there? We look at the claim that Jesus' bodily remains have been unearthed, along with those of his family. And we also bring you the latest news from the fascinating world of archaeology. Don't miss an issue. Subscribe online or ask for Archaeological Diggings at your local newsagent.
Welcome back. And joining us now from Canberra is the Australian Christian Lobby's Managing Director, Lyle Shelton. How are you, Lyle?
I'm really well, thanks, Kent. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, good to have you. Now, Lyle, we've reported on InFocus News previously about two senior federal politicians, Philip Ruddock and Chris Hayes, who say Australia should provide a temporary safe haven for people escaping violence and persecution in the Middle East. But it sounds like they're not the only voices calling for this solution now.
No, that's right, Kent. They've been calling for this since about March of this year. ACL and 20,000 of our supporters have been saying we should dramatically increase the refugee intake so that we can provide some assistance and help for people fleeing violent religious persecution in Iraq and Syria in particular. And of course, many of these people are Christians. So it's great to see these two men from both sides of the political fence calling for it. But there really does need to be some action taken from the government, as this call is now a few months old and the situation there is desperate.
OK, now you actually spoke to these gentlemen just recently. Let's just have a quick look at some of the comments made by Mr Ruddock and Mr Hayes.
Yeah, I think that this is a time not pulling down the shutters and think this is Fortress of Australia. Australia has a very clear role to play in world affairs.
I think a Kosovo-type solution in which you give people safe haven visas, which we believe should be appropriate until it's safe for them to be able to return home, is a way forward.
So, Lyle, what needs to happen for Australia and other countries, I guess, to offer a safe haven to these hundreds of thousands or even millions of refugees?
Well, we need the global community to take responsibility for this crisis. As we've heard, it's the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II, and really not enough is being done to help these people. Now, a country like Australia can't do everything, but we can do something, and our humanitarian intake is very low at 13,700. Even if we could just take several thousand on a temporary basis, that would be of great assistance. What would be better is if we doubled our humanitarian intake with a focus on those who are the most heavily persecuted. At the moment, our response is very lacklustre. The situation is at crisis point, and we vowed that this would never happen again after World War II, when Jewish people were persecuted for their religion. Here we have entire cities and regions of people being driven out and killed because of their religion, and we're not doing enough in response. So we must act, and we must act quickly.
Yeah. OK, well, thanks so much for your time this week, Lyle.
Thanks a lot, Kent.
And now it's time for Food in Focus.
Yeah, no, look, you wouldn't believe it. It could have been that cows in the medieval ages 500 years ago used to munch this stuff in the paddocks of old Europe. Today it's a superfood and has hit everybody's table. Sue Rad, welcome.
Hi,
Tell
James.
us about this fantastic food. What's it called and what's it about?
It is amazing. Kale is an old world vegetable that's from the bigger, the broader cabbage family.
I never ate this when I was a kid.
And the amazing thing about it, James, is that it's absolutely loaded with nutrients. So it is packed with nutrients such as vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, with minerals like iron and calcium. But one of the most exciting phytonutrients in kale that I'm particularly interested in is something called lutein. Lutein, and that's what gives it that sort of dark green colour. And lutein at the moment is being intensely studied for how it might be able to help our brain.
Oh, our brains.
Our memory and our thinking ability.
It's a very big leafy kind of vegetable. This one's got a few holes. But,
and kale is particularly rich in lutein. I mean, you know, it may contain 20 to 30 times as much lutein as broccoli. So these dark green leafy vegetables are loaded in lutein, very important for the brain. But the other area that's getting quite a lot of research looking into it is the area of breast cancer.
Yeah.
So studies such as, for example, a study in China showed that women who consume these cruciferous type vegetables like kale on a daily basis have about a 50% lower risk of developing breast cancer.
Is it again the lutein factor inside the kale?
Well,
or?
it's probably the combination of all those nutrients, this synergy that scientists are very interested in at the moment, that you get when you eat whole foods rather than trying to
So it's the dark greenness of the entire...
And the other thing is, if you've already got breast cancer, and this is an important message, they've shown that women who frequently eat these kind of vegetables have lower recurrences of getting another type of cancer. So this is really strongly anti-cancer, it's antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory. You know, what can't kale do?
Okay, it's just packed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's different, I didn't know there were different kinds of kale.
There are, but in Australia, you know, it's only kind of been 5 years that we've been seeing kale at the markets and in the supermarkets, and this is probably the most common one, the curly kale.
Yes,
but
I've seen
we're
that.
also seeing what's called the Tuscan kale or the dinosaur kale for its appearance.
Dinosaur.
Yes.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter which kale you use. You might even grow the red Russian kale. It's all really important.
And you said there's some giant
greens.
kale as well. Massive.
There are some kales that look even bigger.
Okay. Well, how would you actually use it?
Well, there are many ways.
I've only tried it in your giant green smoothie last month. I'd never eaten it before.
That's right. So you can use it raw in smoothies or in salads.
Okay.
Now, you might like to have a taste of my yummy kale salad there, and I'm just going to show you while you're tasting that how to chiffonade kale. This is really important if you're making a raw salad. So you just strip that off, off the rib. And the important thing is...
this is actually nice.
What does it remind you of?
Not the giant green smoothie, folks.
No.
It's got a sweetness to it. It's got, you can taste the pomegranate and it's got
That's
the kale.
right. Yep.
But it's lost that bitterness.
It's lost the bitterness because of the lemon and the olive oil, which masks the bitterness. But let me show you how to chiffonade it. You really need to slice it.
Truly.
Now, I hope you can see that on camera, but you need to slice it very finely.
Oh, that's what you've done here.
Very, very finely, not coarsely. Sometimes I see kale salads where the kale is chopped coarsely. You want to slice it finely, such as this, because to make a beautiful kale salad, you need to massage those leaves down.
Oh, yes.
Then
Marinates
they release,
it in the dressing.
It does. So the flavours blend, and
That's what
actually, with sitting, it tastes like bubble gum. So you never thought you'd get that from kale salad.
It has a smoothness to it. The kale itself on its own was a bit rough last time, I thought.
That's right.
There's a
So
smooth.
you can use kale in so many ways. You can add it to risottos, you can add it to stir fries, you can add it to soup. And the most important thing is don't ever throw it out. So once you've used a few leaves or half of the kale, just chop up the remainder of the kale and freeze it. By freezing it, you actually enhance the sweetness, and then you've got it ready on tap, so to speak, and you can add it to all kinds of things. And just before we finish off, something else that's become very trendy, of course, are kale chips. A lot of people like to make kale chips to swap.
A chip.
It is.
So I don't need a fork for this.
Easy
It's
to
crispy.
make. Again, you can just slice it into ribbons, spread it on a tray, brush it or spray it with extra virgin olive oil and slow bake it at a low temperature for about 20-25 minutes.
Well, before I
Super
try my
nutritious.
chip, do you mind if I tell everyone something really fun? One of the best
Go
things I
ahead.
like about the fact the pomegranate seeds in here, it's so much fun preparing pomegranate. Did you know that last night Sue had splashed pomegranate all over her cheeks while she's preparing her kale salads? It's just beautiful, truly.
It's delicious and super healthy,
It is.
and a really, really
You
important
make
vegetable
food
to
so
have
much
every
fun,
day.
Sue. You really do. SueRad.com. You should go and check it out for yourself. But let's have a look at this chip. I've never had a kale chip. I bet you haven't either. Let's try
Go for
it. Does it crunch? It's almost like potato.
It is.
That's good.
Thousands of years ago, a series of ancient prophecies were disguised within a system of mysterious symbols. For centuries, these remarkable predictions have been sealed to the world until now. Check out our new Secrets of Prophecy online course today in 24 beautifully illustrated free studies at www.itiswrittenoceania.tv or call 1300 300 389 for your free copy today.
Hi, welcome back. Well, the demise of religion in Australia is being, I guess, celebrated by some and mourned by others. But I've got Roy Williams here today, who's written this book, Post-God Nation. Is Australia a post-God nation, Roy?
Yes and no. is the answer, Kent. We're still a godly nation in certain key respects. I mean, according to the last census, 61% of people still identified as Christian.
But how many of those go to church regularly?
Yeah, only about, less than 10%.
So it's in the single figures now?
It's in the high single figures of regular church attendance.
Okay.
So that's one way you can measure it. But another way, probably a more significant way, is to look at basic aspects of our society that had Christian origins. So, for example, things as basic as egalitarianism, the scientific method, the rule of law. In the book I try to explain why all of those things are the products of Christianity, and those things aren't about to go away.
Which is quite counterintuitive for some people. They would see those things as very secular features of our society.
They might, but they'd be wrong. I mean, all the great scientists of the Renaissance and afterwards, virtually all of them were devout Christians.
Okay.
That's history.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at it, because this is about Australia. Your book is about Australia in particular. So let's look at that. Now, when America began as a settler nation, of course, it was all about religious freedom and the Pilgrim Fathers, and you know they fell to their knees on the beach or what, you know, thank God for bringing them there. Whereas the story we hear about when some of those convict ships came in, they landed on the shore. I think, was it Robert Hughes in The Fatal Shore said basically they arrived and it was a drunken orgy.
There was one night that was pretty loose in Sydney very, very early on. Although,
but people say Australia's a godless nation from its very beginnings. I mean,
they do, including Christian historians have underplayed the role of the churches and Christians. I think that's a mistake. The more I read into it and researched it, I must admit I was surprised at the extent to which you found in the record vital individuals being devout Christians. Let me give one example.
Yeah, give some examples.
A good example is Lachlan Macquarie. He's been called justly probably the second father of Australia.
Okay, he was one of the early governors of New South Wales.
The early governor of New South Wales from 1810 to 1821. Now, Macquarie turned the colony around. It was a penal colony, pure and simple, a dumping place for convicts.
Yeah.
Macquarie was the first to say, look, once these people have served their term, they should be free men and women, treated on the same level as everyone else. And he's been praised by historians ever since for that sort of enlightened role. What people forget is Macquarie was an evangelical Christian. He was a late convert. His wife had been a lifelong evangelical.
Okay.
And so he came to New South Wales imbued with this belief in the power of redemption, that all people were equal in the sight of God, and that in this new land, once they'd served their time, and he cut short a lot of sentences, the emancipists were given a second chance. That's really where our fair go ethic comes from.
Okay.
Point two, transportation of convicts would have continued, or did continue, well into the 19th century. And lots of wealthy people loved it because the convicts were a source of free labour.
Sure, yeah.
For economic reasons, the system would have continued. It was the churches, leading clerics like John Dunmore Lang and others who campaigned against transportation on moral grounds. And that was really the first step in Australia's path to becoming an independent country. You had to get rid of that convict system first.
And you point out in your book, Roy, that all through Australia's history there were key people of strong faith, men, women. Carolyn Chisholm comes to mind.
She's an early one, but for example, the suffragettes, the women who campaigned for the vote for women in the late 19th century, almost overwhelmingly they were Christian women.
They came out of that sort of women's Christian temperance union sort of background, didn't they?
Christian temperance movement was absolutely crucial.
And even coming closer to the modern era, I was really surprised to read that the very conservative B.A. Santa Maria, and his party was actually the first one to speak out against the White Australia policy.
B.A. Santa Maria was a very devout Catholic, set up the DLP in the 1950s. seen as a sort of reactionary figure, and in some ways he was. But yes, the DLP was the first party to oppose the White Australia policy. On the basic Christian ground that, God is colourblind. So I think people forget that multiculturalism is another great example, I argue in the book, of something that the Christian churches don't get enough credit for. Indigenous reconciliation is another one.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Well, we're fast running out of time,
Sure.
So yeah. I do want to sort of cut to the chase.
Yep.
Because we are in a situation, as we said now, where religion, Christianity is declining in Australia. Do you have any practical tips as to how we might reclaim that?
I think the education system is the key here. For a couple of generations now, children coming out of most schools in Australia haven't been taught the basics about religion. I'm not talking here about doctrinal instruction in any particular denomination. I'm just talking about basic religious concepts, the metaphysical questions of life. Is there a God? Why am I here?
So even the comparative religion stuff about Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, the whole works.
I think every Australian child should be equipped by the time they leave school to educate themselves properly about these questions and ask the right questions.
So then at least if they're going to make a decision on faith, they can do it on a basis of knowledge rather than ignorance.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's secularism by default now, I firmly believe, not secularism by choice.
Sure. One more tip just before we finish?
I reckon there should be far more conscience votes in Parliament. I think every vote, more or less, is a true conscience vote.
Yeah, I think you're saying that everything except supply and some of those real basic votes of no confidence. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
See, religion, I don't think, can be confined just to what happens in church on a Sunday.
Sure.
It's part of everything. All the big issues about welfare and climate change and all of these are at core moral issues.
And look, there's so much more of these sort of issues that you cover in this book. Where can we get it? Is it to
ABC shops?
ABC
certainly.
shops?
Coorong has certainly got plenty of copies, and most good bookshops, as they say.
Thanks so much for your time, Roy.
Thank you,
really
Ken.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We'll see you after the break.
Signs of the Times, a magazine for a world on the brink. And this month in Signs, is there really a place reserved to burn sinners for eternity? Why your morning ritual may be negatively impacting your health. There are Facebook friends and then there are real-life friends. How the Magna Carta, signed 800 years ago, shaped our world today. All in this month's Signs of the Times. Subscribe to Signs today and change your life.
Hello. Well, we've had news, views and interviews, so I guess, Sibel, that means our time's up.
It is. If you'd like to catch any segment of today's program again, all the videos are there at our website to watch and share, record.net.au.
Yeah, do some searching in the archives. There are some real gems hiding back there.
Absolutely. Don't be a stranger, stay in touch, and we'll see you next week on Record in Focus.
God bless.